Hi guys, good evening. So hope you guys all of you guys are here. So we will start from now on. So welcome to the introduction to the JMeter series. So we are planning to have a series of session to uh, do give you a good understanding about the A to Z JMeter. So in this session series, we are planning to start from the introduction, setup and rescripting, and then executing, analyzing, and with additional plugins and all, we will teach you all the uh, aspect of the JMeter. So welcome to the session, and we have a quite number of crowd. So let us start the session. Okay, so before I start the session, I would like to give you a small intro about the CQC, Colombo Quality Camp. So the Colombo Quality Camp is the bunch of enthusiastic looking to improve the quality of product and processes while aiming to kill the gap between QA engineers and the software engineers. So our objective is to kill the gap between QA engineers and the software engineers. So let's start the session. So I would like to start with the goal of the session. So in this session, I hope I'm audible enough and you can see my screen. So I will start with the goal of the session. So we are planning to discuss in this session, we are planning to discuss what is performance testing is, what are the performance testing tool that we can use, and what is JMeter and why we should use JMeter. And we will give you a brief on what are we going to do in this within this week. And I hope you guys all will stay with till end of this series. Okay, so we'll start with the performance test. What is performance testing? So before I start this introduction, I hope you guys might have a little understanding about the performance testing. But before, in case if some of you don't know what is performance testing, I would let me discuss what is performance testing is. So when as a QA engineer, we do testing, right? So I hope most of you are familiar with QA engineer task. So as a QA engineer, we do testing. So when it comes to performance testing, that is some kind of a non-functional testing type. Non-functional testing in type, there are a lot of non-functional testing types. One is performance testing, there is security testing, there are some other testing aspect as well. So when it comes to performance testing, we test our applications with a user load and see our application how our application is performing, or whether we have any issue with performing uh, with the lot of load. So what does it mean by load? Load mean, so let's say that I have developed an application. It is a login page. Then in this page, as a basic requirement, I should be able to log into that page. But is there and if I take me as a one user, there are a lot of users wanted to log in to that application as well. So in that sense, if we have an application online, then in that for that application, there are a lot of users wanted to access that application. So if there are if let's say there are 1,000 of users want to access this application, but so in that scenario, you have to think about how do we cater that kind of load. Okay, load in the sense users. So let's say that you have a small server with one small server that you could cater 5 or 50 users, but lot of interested people are there out of there to access your application. So then in that case, you can't cater that kind of load. So to address such scenarios, we do performance testing beforehand, in the sense before releasing to the production, and with virtual users. It's mean we let's say that I am a user and I am a real user, then I with the help of performance testing tool, what we do is we emulate our user behavior to and generate lot of users. We call those users as virtual users. Okay, and while generating load with these virtual users, we analyze how our servers and how our system perform and how our application is performed, and analyze these stats and see whether will this how this application cater for the lot of users like users. So let's say that I am a real user, so I do some login and logout function. So in the performance testing, what we do is I emulate my behavior, login and logout behavior, using a performance testing tool, and generate virtual users, not the real users, virtual users. And with the help of that uh, virtual users, we generate load into the server, and while performing that load in that server, we will analyze how our system performance is. So in that case, what kind if I give you an example, what kind of things that we check when it comes to the performance analysis, normally we check the response time and CPU utilization, memory utilization. Likewise, there are a lot of matrices that we could check while we performing load on the cell. So that's bit brief on performance testing. So next, I will tell you how performance testing tool work. Hope you guys have a good idea about the performance testing is, and I kindly request you to be on mute. It would be nice to avoid some disturbance. So if you have any question, you could ask now, or we have a Q&A session at the end. So feel free to interrupt me anytime. So we can discuss and continue. So next up, I would like to talk about how performance testing tool work. So it will be really useful for you to understand the JMeter. So with this intro, you will get what is the task of performance testing tool. Then we will move into the JMeter. Okay. So, so this is a typical workflow of a performance test tool. So we have in a performance test tool, we have a script, we have a controller machine, we have a load generators, we have somewhere that we can collect the stat, and we have some facilities to analyze the results as well. So when it comes to the script, so JMeter also we have to create a script. So there are different ways that we can create a script. So most popular and most easiest way is to recording a user behavior, and we can make that user behavior into a virtual user. So to do that, we have two techniques that we used. One is parameterization, other one is the correlation. So parameterization in the sense, let's say that you are a first user of the application, so you have a unique username and unique password. So if I simulate 1,000 users, those 1,000 users should have different username and password, because if I use the same password, you can't it won't be a new user. So it will be the same use. So likewise, in the scripting, we have to give some test data like username and password. So with that data, we can differentiate the virtual users by and their behaviors. So so for feeding some test data like username and password, we call parameterization. So, and also there's another technique called correlation. So I will let me explain that also. So when we send a request into the server will respond with some details, right? Let's say that I'm entering username and password. I send the request into server will respond with the session ID for me. So that will be a dynamic one. So it will differ from each user to use each user. Okay. So that value, if I use same value for everyone, every users, then that script will be wrong and that user session is wrong. So in that case, we have to we have to have a technique to identify that dynamic values and pass it to the next step in the script. So that for that technique we call it is a correlation. So that is the main two technique we use in the scripting. So we will discuss this technique and how we use this and in the script in next session tomorrow. So okay, then the other one is the test scenario. So in this segment, so I point out in with number 2. So in here, what we do is we upload that script into the control machine. In JMeter, it's the same. We do the script in the same machine and we do the execution also with the same machine, but we can I will explain the load generate technique next. So here we upload the script. We can plan our test according to our requirement. Let's say my requirement is I want to test with 10 users for 30 minutes. That is my requirement. So this is where we do plan our test scenario. Okay, since once we plan it, we execute the test. When we execute the test, if I use the single machine to do the everything, then there will be a problem because then you uh, let's think that there even though so in a real world also no one use the same machine to do the same access the same application unless it is a desktop application, right? So there will be a different devices to access the application. So to simulate that kind of behavior, we use load generators. So load generators is a technique that we use to distribute our load among the different geographical location and the different virtual machine. So it is to what we can do is we upload the script, we plan the test, and we create the load generator, and we in that load generator we actually spin up agent, and we link that load generator into the our control machine here, and we can have thousand of load generators, so thousand of load generators. But with your requirement, let's say you have 5 virtual machines to test with, so you can have divide your user load among these load generators, and we can do the distributed testing. So in once you set up the load generator, what will happen is once you start execution, you will send the command to this load generator, and this load generator generate load on your application and send the results back to the this controller machine. So in the controller machine, we can collect the results, we can analyze and those results, and we can give the report, and we can identify the issues there. Okay, so that is the typical architecture of the performance testing tool. So let me explain how our series link with this architecture. So tomorrow we will discuss how we do scripting properly with your parameterization, correlation, and recording and everything. And the day after tomorrow, we will do execution. How do we do execution with your machine? How do we do create the load generator and do the distributed testing with the load generators? And day after, in third day, we will discuss how and in the third day we will discuss how we collect the results and what are the listeners we have, what are the technique that we can use collect the results. And in the third day we will discuss how we analyze these results and how we find out the bottlenecks of the performance bottleneck in your application. So that's almost the how it's work with performance testing tools. So let's see what are the tools that are available in the market before we go into the JMeter. So there are a lot of commercial tool available in the market and also the open source tool. So most popular commercial tool is load runner. We can use performance center, apical load, neo load kind of tool with the in terms of commercial tools is cause with the number of users. When it comes to open source tool, JMeter is the most popular tool and most established tool. So we will discuss that. Uh, so next up, so we to start with the JMeter, we will I think we should know about the history. So it's the most popular for performance testing, open source performance testing tool in the market, and it started in 2019. Okay, why we should select for JMeter? It's an open source and it is the most reliable tool than other open source tool. It won't change the so there are a lot of community support available, and we can do most of the features that has inbuilt with the commercial tool. We can have this JMeter by doing some configuration by so we will discuss on the 5th day on those things. And also easy to learn and because a lot of community support is there, and you don't need to have a lot of programming knowledge to use this. You just need to learn about how requests and response are working. And also we can we have support for the CI/CD integration as well. And also it is supporting for different operating systems like even Linux and to Windows Linux kind of operating system. You can use JMeter for on every or most of the operating system available. Okay, so I will before I wrap up, I will take you through these series sessions. So today we are going to talk about introduction to JMeter and the feature introduction. What are the features that JMeter has? So this my part is done. Tomorrow we will discuss setup, how to set up record, how to play back, and we will do correlation and parameterization and some other performance scripting technique we will discuss tomorrow. And day after tomorrow we will discuss about the execution. When it come to the execution, we will discuss distributed execution with load generators as well. And also we will discuss what kind of matrices and measurement we could take with the JMeter in the third day. And also so in the fourth day we will discuss what are the with these report matrices and measurement, what kind of conclusion that you could have get. And also what kind of report, how do we report our performance issues for your customers or your technical paper. And these things we will discuss on the fourth day. And also in the fifth day we will discuss most important plugin that as I mentioned in the previous one. There are a lot of plugins available in the market with the commercial tool. Sorry, there are a lot of features available in the market with the commercial tool. So most of the features we could use with the JMeter if with the help of plugin. Okay, so in that, so we are going to talk about them, and we will introduce few plugins that you can use easily. And and also we will discuss what are the best practices on that day, because you will have a lot thorough understanding on JMeter by fifth day, because if you go through all of this session. And so we will discuss best practices. And feel free to ask any question upfront. We all our 5 speakers are available in all 5 days, so they can answer your questions. And I also recommend you to install and JMeter and Java and set up your machine for from tomorrow onward, so you can do with us, do the things with us, and you can practice it, and hope you will learn lot of them out of this session. So I would like to invite Samira to introduce features in JMeter. So over to you, Samira.
Good evening, everyone. I think you guys get an idea about performance testing and why we need to use a tool for performance testing. So today I'm going to talk about how we can install JMeter tool and what are the important components or the elements in JMeter. So I hope many of you have heard about this JMeter tool and try this tool since this is one of the most commonly used tool for the performance testing. So before start, if we think about a scenario in this pandemic situation, most of the people used to buy items using online application without going to the supermarket. So in that case, if you are providing a software application to shop online, it should be able to handle large number of orders at a time. So to ensure that as QAs or the developers, we need to test our application using heavy user load. So it is very difficult testers to manually verify this, and it's quite easy to use a tool to test this kind of scenario. And the advantage is, as Sugandhika mentioned, by using a tool, we can simulate large number of users and validate whether application is able to handle that much of load at a given time. So this is just one example, and there can be different scenarios which we need to do the performance testing based on our application requirement. So other thing is, before I'm going to explain the rest of the things, if you have any questions, please put them into the this chat. So, okay, let's move to the next slide. So now we'll see how to install, how we can install this JMeter tool. So to install JMeter, Java is a prerequisite. So we need to install Java first. And if we go to the this the Oracle official site. So in here we can download the Java SDK based on our operating system, and we can install the Java. So I'm not going to show you how to install Java today, since we all very familiar with how to about the Java installation. So other thing is, once we install the Java, we can check whether it is successfully installed or not in our machine. Like we can use the command prompt, and here we can use Java minus version command. And if you successfully install Java into your machine, in that case, we can see the Java version installed. So then it is okay. And next, we have to download the JMeter. So if I go back to my presentation and using Apache original website, so if I go there, in here we have a section called download releases, and under that we have to use this binary section. From here we can download this zip folder to install the JMeter. So the only thing is we have to download this zip folder and unzip it and copy it to your required location. So I have already downloaded the JMeter and I have copied the C drive. So in here you can see the Apache JMeter 5.4.1 folder. And if I go inside here, you can see there are different folders available. We need to go to the bin folder to open up the JMeter. So let's say you are running on the Windows. In that case, you have to use this JMeter batch file. Or if you are using Linux operating system, in that case, you have to use this JMeter sh file. So I'm using Windows. I'm going to double click on it and it will open up a command prompt and load the JMeter UI. Okay, this is the JMeter UI. So the installation is pretty simple. Just download the zip folder and unzip it and copy to required location. And we have to open up the relevant file based on our based on our operating system, likewise. So if I go back to my presentation again, so let's discuss about important elements in the JMeter UI. So there are some main elements in JMeter and there are many more. So we will discuss these elements one by one in the next slide. So I'll start with the test plan. So if we forget about the JMeter and let's think about our day-to-day manual testing as QS. So as we know, test plan is something that consists test scenarios or the test data which used to uh, execute real-time conditions of a test. So when you open up the JMeter, you can see a default test plan created. So test plan is kind of a top level body of the JMeter and we can add all uh, other elements under this test plan. Normally, a complete test plan consists one or more elements like thread groups, samplers, listeners, and many other elements. Basically, if I go to my JMeter UI, so here you can see there's a default test plan created like this. So I can rename my test plan as I want. So I'll add like demo test or something. And before adding the before adding any other elements, I'm going to save this test plan. So here you can see my test plan is saved using the JMX extension file. And I'm going to save this test plan. Likewise, we can save the test plan. Okay, we'll see the next element. So this is very important element in JMeter, which is the thread group. Thread group consists a group of users or the thread. So by using a thread, we can simulate one real user request to the server. So we can configure number of threads under thread group properties and JMeter will generate user request based on the number of threads we define in the thread group properties. So other thing is we can configure the way of sending user requests like either it can be concurrently or in some predefined sequence. So let's see what are these properties, and there are some terms we need to understand when defining a thread group in JMeter. So if I go back to my test plan, so if I right click on this thread group, so you can see there's a option called threads, and under that we can see the thread group. So by using this thread properties, we can define the number of users likewise. So I'll explain other things first and come back to the configuration. So as I told earlier, so the number of threads means the number of virtual users. For example, in here I have set number of threads as 10. In that case, JMeter will create and simulate 10 user requests to the server. And the second one is the ramp up period. Ramp up period is the time which JMeter takes to bring all users up and running mode and hitting the server. So if we set the ramp up period as 1, in that case, as soon as I start my test, all the 10 users will directly jump in and hit the server. So that means concurrently send 10 user requests to the server. In here, I have set it as 100. So in that case, it will take 100 seconds to up and running all 10 users. For example, if we divide 100 by 10, like the ramp up period by the number of thread threads. That means 10 seconds. So that means each new user will start sending a request after around 10 seconds. For example, first user hitting the server after 10 seconds, then the second user will take another 10 seconds to send the request. Likewise, by the 100th second, all users would have hit the server. In this kind of scenario, we are not generating the uh, request in concurrently, but will be in the increments. So these configurations are depending on your test scenario. And the final thing is the loop count. That is the number of iteration that thread group will execute. For example, if I here set loop count as 2, then the JMeter will run the same script for 2 times. If you check this infinite checkbox, your test will run forever unless you manually stop it. So likewise, we can set our thread properties. So in my test plan, for the demo purpose, I just add 5 users like this and save the test plan. So other thing, so if I quickly go through this icon before start the execution, here we can use this icon to start the new test plan, and this is to use this icon used to add existing templates, and this icon is to open existing JMeter script, and this is to save, cut, copy, like copy paste, likewise the main basic things. And these two uh, expand all and collapse all icon used to expand and collapse JMeter elements in the test plan, and this toggle icon used to enable and disable the elements in the test plan. For example, if I click on this, it will disable like this. So these two uh, buttons used to start the script, and while the test is in execution phase, we can use these two stop button, and this is to clear all the results and logs in the test execution, and this is to search any element in the test plan. Likewise, this is also a bit important. For example, if I click on this help, so it will redirect you to the JMeter user manual page, and we can refer anything we want about the JMeter. And likewise, if we so in here you can see the timer, and which shows the execution time, and this is another important thing. We can click on this and see the execution logs from this panel, and from this button it shows the execution progress. Likewise, we can use these icons when we are doing the scripting. Okay, so let's move to our next element, which is samplers. So now we know how to set up users and other configuration using thread group in JMeter. So how does a thread group knows what type of request it needs to send to the server? The answer is samplers. So we can use these samplers to do that job. So it can let JMeter know what type of request that need to go to the server. So requests can be HTTP, HTTPS, or the FTP, JDBC, and there are many other protocols. So normally HTTP and HTTPS requests, these are the most common way of sending user requests to the server. And FTP requests used to upload or download a file from server. JDBC requests used for the database performance testing. And as we know, SMTP used to test mainly about the mail server request. So let's see how we can add a sampler to our test plan. So I have added a thread group. By right click on this thread group, we can see under this add menu, there's an option called sampler. So from here, you can see different requests are available. Based on our requirement, we can select the request. So I'm going to add the simple HTTP request for the demo purpose. And so I will use this open weather map site for the demo. And in here, we can see different API calls. And I'm using this API to retrieve weather data using the city name. So I'm going to use this API call and set up this in my test plan. Okay, so I just add that request here, and this is an HTTP request, and I have to give the server name like this. This is server name, and in this section we have to define the path. From this drop down, we can select the request type. So this is just retrieve some data. So this is a get request, and if you are submitting any form or something, we have to use the post request. Based on our request type, we can select it from the here. And in here, we have to define the city name and the API key. So I'm going to get weather data for the Colombo. So I can define the city name like this. And using that website, we can generate the free API key. We can use that for testing. So I have generated one and used here like this. And if you want to rename this request, we can just rename weather data for the Colombo. Likewise, we can rename requests. So I have set up a very basic request, and I'm going to save this request. Likewise, we can add any type of samplers to our test plan. So if I go back to presentation again, so let's discuss about the listeners. So once we set up thread group and the samplers, there should be a way to see the results of the test execution. For that, we can use listeners. So as we know, performance testing is all about analyzing server responses using various forms, and we can determine how a system performs in terms of responsiveness and stability under particular workload. So then as a QS, we have to present these findings using results to our stakeholders. So by using these listeners, we can show the results of the test execution, and we can get an idea about our performance statistics. Here we can show results using different formats. For example, graph, table, tree, log, likewise. So graph results, listeners display the server response time in a graph, and results tree shows results of user request in basic HTML format, and table results show a summary of test result in a text file in a table, and log shows the summary results in a text file. So we will talk about these listener types and how we can analyze results in our third session. So you can get more idea in that session. So, okay, so if I go to my sample test plan, so in here we can add listeners to our thread group. For example, if I right click on here, and you can see under this add menu, there's a option called listeners, and there are different type of listeners. So I'm going to add two listeners. One is view results day, and other one is the summary report. So this shows results in the tabular format, and here we are showing the results in the basic HTML format like this. So if I want to rename my thread group, I can rename that is also. So we can add meaningful names, so then we can refer it later likewise. So in here I have set up two listeners as well. Now I think basic things are ready. We can execute and see our results. For that, I'm going to start my test. So yes, I have set up this and okay. And here you can see the time. For example, in here I have set up ramp up period as 1 and the number of users is 5. So it should ideally send 5 user requests to the server. And here you can see it sent 5 requests to the server like this. So if I click on this from here, we can see the response code and the response message. And using this request tab, we can check our request that we defined under sampler. So likewise, if we go to response data, we can see the correct response. And if I go to the summary report, this shows the number of samplers. That means the number of requests we sent. We configured 5 users, so the sampler count is 5. In here, we can see average, minimum, maximum, time it taken to send the request, and the error count, throughput. Actually, these things we will talk about in more detail in our next sessions. So I'm not going to explain these things in detail. So now we know how to add a thread group and add a sampler, and then set up listeners to view the results. Okay. So if we move to our presentation again, and next we will see what is timer. So when performing load dose stress testing on your application, JMeter will send a request without stopping between each sampler. So there can be unexpected issues happened when we send non-stop requests to the server. And other thing is actually this is not happened in the real scenarios. And as users, we will take some time to think before doing an action. So we have to recreate the same scenario in our script as well. To recreate that scenario, we can add this timer element and which define a period to wait between each request. So that is the main purpose we are using these timers. So I'm going to show how we can set up a timer. So before that I'm going to add another sampler. For example, I'm going to add another basic HTTP request, and we can move our element like this by drag and dropping each element. So here I'm going to add another request using a different city. So we can use the same server name and path also same. I'm going to add the different city like London. So likewise, so I'm retrieving the weather data for London using this request. So in here, I'm going to add timer between each request. For example, if I need to wait this request 5 seconds, so in that case, I can use this timer element. In here, we can use this constant timer. And I'm going to add as 5 seconds. This is milliseconds, so it's 5,000 then. And for this request also, we can add a timer. So I need to wait it 2 seconds. Likewise, we can configure. So to demo purpose, I'm going to update this. Otherwise, it will send request within 1 second. So I'm going to increase this, and that means within 30 seconds, all 5 users should hit the server. So if I'm going to execute it again, so we can, as I mentioned, we can clear all the results and any logs using this clear all button. And I'm going to execute my script again. Here you can look at to the time element, it should send one request after 5 seconds. And then then it should take 2 seconds to start London. Likewise, based on the timer, it will wait for the period and send the request to the server. And this will be done in increments, not in the concurrently. So you can see within 30 seconds, all 5 users will send the request to the server. So that is the main purpose of adding the timers. So we'll move to the next element. This is the assertion. So when executing test scenarios, we need to validate response of the request. So it can be response code or the response time. So we need to check whether actual response of the request is according to the expected result. So assertion is the element where we can verify the result. So if I go to my test plan, so I'm going to clear this and I'm going to add the assertion. So I'm going to validate each request response code. For that, I can add assertion called response assertion. In here, we can configure using the response code. For example, I have to choose this response code and what is the expected response code. We can define like this. And let's say if I want to validate the response time for this request, in that case, I can right click on this and add assertion using the duration assertion. That is, we are validating the response time. So here I'm adding it like 500 milliseconds. So within 500 milliseconds, it should complete the request. So that is our expected behavior. And for this, I'm going to add assertion with duration 1000. That means 1 second. Within 1 second, it should complete the request. Likewise, we can set our expectation. So I'm going to disable this constant timer. Oh, okay. No, we can use that as well. And to verify to view the assertion results, we can use the listener called assertion results. So in here, if I go to listeners, you can see a listener called assertion result. By using this listener, we can show the expected results and the outcome. Okay, so I'm going to start my test again to make it so we can check. I'm going to change it, make it as a wrong one, then we can see whether we can see the assertion results correctly. So if I go here and start my test again. So this shows as red since I have changed it and make it a wrong one. And if we go to the assertion results, so you can see the test is failed because I expected 200. But if I go here and see this is an incorrect response. So this failed. And actually, I couldn't able to show you the assertion for the duration since all the requests completed within the expected time. So if it is fails, that also visible in this assertion results section. Okay. So that is all about for the assertion. Next, we will move to the configuration element. So this element basically used to set default values and variables for later use by the samplers. By using these elements, we can parameterize values in the request and those are executed before the actual request. So if we take this CSV data config, suppose you want to test a website using 100 users by signing with different credentials. So in that case, you don't need to add separate scripts for 100 times, like the request for 100 times. Instead of that, you can parameterize the script to take different user credentials. So this login credentials could be stored in a CSV file. Then it could be reading values from a variable in the CSV file and execute the script for all values we defined in the CSV file. So we will talk how to configure this CSV data config in the tomorrow session. And so I'm not going to demo it today. And for example, if I go back to my test plan, in here also I have defined two requests. This is the same format and I'm retrieving data for the different cities. In that case, I can use a parameter here and we can send these city names using an Excel file without setting these two requests. We can define only one request and parameterize the city name, and we can use a CSV file to read those city name. That is another example. Okay, so that is the about the configuration element, and the last one is the preprocessor and the post-processors. A preprocessor is something that will execute before making a sampler in the test scenario. So it can be used for different performance testing needs. For example, like fetching a data from a database or setting a timeout between sampler execution, likewise. So for the post-processor, these elements are used to perform certain action after processing a sampler request. For example, we can extract value of a session variable from an HTTP request and pass the session variable value to the subsequent request. So in that in some scenario, we need to use those values generated from a request for the subsequent request to make it work. So in that scenario, we can use this post processor. So we will we will see how to set up these things in our next sessions. And I think we have discussed about all the elements, and to summarize what we have done so far. To create a basic JMeter test, this is how we can manually configure using JMeter. So we have to start the JMeter, and then the test plan is created default, and then we have to add thread group. Under that, we can add samplers, that means request. Then to view the results, we can add listeners, and finally we have to validate whether our actual response or the code is according to our expected result. For that, we can use the assertion. And finally, we can run the test and validate our results. So I think I have covered everything about how to create a basic JMeter test, and we will be discussing how to record and playback using JMeter in our tomorrow session. And also we will talk about more in advanced scripting techniques. And yeah, that's all for the today's session. So hope you guys get an idea about how to set up a basic JMeter test. So if you have any questions, please put those questions in the chat. So yeah, thank you.
Okay, Yeah, yes, Samir, thank you very much. And we have few questions in the chat, so we would like to answer them. And so I will take the first question from the Shrikant. So Shrikant has asked why we need to remove jQuery and other things when we do the performance testing. So this is actually an important question. That's why I wanted to take it up in the discussion. So when you do the scripting in JMeter and the any other performance testing tool, uh, we what we do is we send the request into the server and get the response. Okay, so in that scenario, some tasks were happening inside the server, and some task is happening in the client side. So but we what we want to test as a performance tester is how when we put the load into the server, how our application will cater for to that server load. So in that case, client side performance we can avoid when we do the multi-user performance testing like this, like using JMeter. So then when it comes to the client side performance testing, it is a different testing practice, performance testing practice. So the clients, when it comes to client side performance testing, we do check DOM load time, jQuery execution time, JST execution time kind of thing. But when it comes to JMeter kind of thing, we avoid these things because it's happening in the client side. Okay. So because of that CS, JS execution time, jQuery execution time, kind of those things will consider as a front end client side things. We can avoid them. We can actually remove them if, even though it's recorded in your script. Shrikant, I hope I answered your question. So if it's not clear, let me know. So I will clarify.
Yes, thank you. Thank you,
Yeah.
Sagarika.
Okay, and also another question from Kulita, I guess. Yeah, which Java version is more suitable for JMeter? I think it's better to use after 16th version, Java 16th version, more later version than that. It's better to use for because some changes were happening after there were there were in JMeter we there are some feature improvements. So to compatible with that, I hope it's 60 more than 16th later version after 16th is better version. And also another question from Srikant. Is it possible to use run Selenium script in JMeter? I think it's no, because this is Selenium is a automation script. It is considering UI aspect, UI testing type aspect. But JMeter, as I explained in the previously, we consider uh, client server interaction. So it's different practices. So we can't execute that here. Okay. So another one, I think mobile performance testing, I will answer in the chat. So there's another question from Sohan. Is the scenario of using ramp up time as 0 valid? So ramp up time mean we when we do the performance testing before start putting the load, we just we just put we will plan our test to it's gradually increase the load. Okay, so it's better to hold better to have ramp up time as always uh, than putting sudden load into the application. It's better to have ramp up time. So that's my opinion. So it's not, we should not put a 0 ramp up time. The another question from for the API key.
Yeah, Sugandhika, I paste the URL in the chat. So you can sign up there and have a key for free. Also, we will demonstrate that one also in tomorrow's session. If you have any questions on it, until then you can have a try by using that link.
Yeah. So I think we have answered almost all the questions here, and please stay with us for this week. And also, if you please try to do along with us. So it will be less boring than listening to someone. So just try install JMeter and all, and come tomorrow, and we will do scripting together. And till that, have a great evening, I guess. Thank you. Thank you for participation.